Foothills. I'm Douglas Peake, and if you're here for the first time or coming back from Easter, we are so glad that you have joined us. If you're watching for the first time online, we are really glad that you are here. And we don't really, talk about these things a lot because we are just so overwhelmed. On our Easter weekend, though, we had over 3,000 people come to one of our services. So that's really an amazing thing. Give God the glory. That's his thing. And so it's really amazing what God is doing and building his kingdom. And so we're just glad that we can be a part of it. If you're coming back because you visited for the first time, today is your first time, or if you're watching for the first time, all you got to do is scan that QR code and you can watch a few little videos anonymously. You don't have to sign up for anything. Get to know who we are as a church and what we believe that God wants to do through us for his kingdom. Also, because of Easter, some people made decisions for Christ, and there's a big harvest revival or outreach going on right now. And so people are making decisions for Christ there. And once that happens, baptism is always on your radar. And so if you would like to know more about baptism at Foothills and how it works and what we do and kind of all that process, right after this service is a baptism of believer meeting. It's right over by the chapel. You can go over, meet with some folks. They'll tell you all about it. If you're watching online and you'd like to access that teaching, you can do so by scanning that QR code as well, or just text FH Baptism to 72,000. You can text a lot of keywords to that number and get all kinds of digital discipleship. Now, we're in a new series today, and so I thought I would try to pick one of the most controversial titles that I could think of, and that is The Future is Male and Female. So why would we do a series on that, and what's that all about? Well, it's about your family, and it's about families in general. However, families are not these abstract things. They are built upon males and females. In Genesis chapter 1, it says that God created them, male and female, he created them in his image. So males and females are both a representation of the image of God in this world, but we live in a society that has values that are being propagated that seem to be tearing men and women apart, pitting them against each other. Males and females then are struggling in who they are. What does it mean to be a male? What does it mean to be a female? And they're struggling, because of that, they're struggling in their relationships. People finding each other and falling in love, or they're getting married and staying married, raising children in a healthy and vibrant, not perfect, but a healthy emotional and psychological environment. So it's really important, I think, that we, instead of running away from these things and avoiding them and hoping they get better, that we actually see what the Bible has to teach on it. We lean into it a little bit. And so, as with everything, our goal is not to tell you what to think. Our goal is to give you information and the tools to think clearly for yourself and then make up your own mind. Because in the end, it's what you believe and what you think that matters the most in your faith. And that's why we're here, is to help you develop and grow your faith. So let's just look at the stats out there, because we're just laying kind of a groundwork to do this 6-week study and see what's really going on. Well, males and females are struggling to get along because right now, according to The Hill, in the last 7 decades, we have now achieved a record proportion of adults that live by themselves. 25% of all households, 1 out of 4, just say it's easier to live by myself than try to live with another human being. The percent of adults between the ages of 20 and 49 now that never get married has reached its highest level since they've been taking or tracking statistics, and that is 35%. I mean, think about that. That's almost 4 out of 10 never ever get married because they don't see the value of that. Today, there is a moniker. You know how they always give you a meme or a moniker, a name? Like, you're a baby boomer, you're a Gen X, you're Gen Z, or, you're this, you're that. Everybody has a title or a moniker or whatever. Well, they have a new one out there for men who are not getting married at all. They're avoiding it. They're called MGTOWs, men going their own way. And so I thought that was kind of funny. But boy, you know it's serious when you get your own moniker, right? Now, it's also important to note that only 6 out of 10 children today grow up in a home with both biological parents. And that's dropping. They think in the next 15 years, it'll be down to just 50%. And see, this is an important thing that says, it seems like it's more and more difficult for people to build healthy, strong families because we live in a society that propagates values that undermines that process, and it makes people trying to do it struggle because of all of the challenging things they're hit with each and every day. Now, whenever you talk about this, first thing that many people do goes, oh, you're so political. I don't want to go to a church that's political. This is not political at all. As a matter of fact, Thomas Friedman, who is one of the most left progressive writers and academics that write for the New York Times, he wrote a book called The World is Flat. And in this book, he basically says that the world in which we live has kind of flattened out. So any country can have the same access to manufacturing and technology and all this kind of stuff as any other country. And his point is, in the book he makes, is that prior to about 30, 40 years ago, America was number 1 on every measurement in the world. And today, it's now 11th. How's America fallen out of the top 10 of every measurement economically and freedom and stability and all that kind of stuff? And this is what he says. In a flat world where everyone has access to everything, values matter more than ever. And his point is that the values in our society no longer reflect being number 1. Every president that I can remember, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W., George Washington. I don't personally remember him, no. I know I am old, but I'm sorry, that was just too funny. I couldn't pass that one up. Where was I? Oh, Obama. Every one of them talked about the importance of the family. Both from broad spectrum of political perspectives. As a matter of fact, President Obama had a huge initiative through his entire administration about fatherhood in minority communities and how important it was. So this is not a political thing. This is a life thing, and we need to look into it. Charles Colson wrote a book in which he talked about this issue of family breakdown and its impact on society. He said in 1986, 2 Harvard sociologists studied why America was falling behind, and what they said is that it was a lack of moral training during the morally formative years. Colson then goes on to write, he says, it hit me that we are raising a generation that lacks male role models. The family's broken down. These kids aren't learning character. Where does character come from? It comes from the habits that you learn in the family first. That's the first basic structure that Aristotle once said is the first school of human instruction. Now, there's an overwhelming amount of literature and research that's coming out right now talking about the psychological struggle of our young people. Prior to COVID, everything in our society was going down. Death by heart disease, death by cancer, death by anything that you can imagine, tragedy, violent crime, except for one thing. Death was skyrocketing, suicide among our young. Anxiety and depression among our young. Then COVID hits, and now the research that's just coming out is absolutely devastating on what has happened with all the shutdowns and the isolation, the lack of socialization, access to education. All of these things have had a phenomenally negative effect on our young people. The stats are so overwhelming, I don't have time to go through them with you. Why is this happening? Why does it seem like our society, everybody has a sense, it just doesn't seem to be on the right track? You know what I'm saying? It's like everybody wants it to go this way, and it keeps... It's like when you're driving on the snow, and there's a big ditch over there, and, you start sliding, you're turning the wheel the other way, you're doing all this, but what do? You just keep... We feel that way. Why is it going on? Well, it's not by accident. And here's my premise. There is a group of elites who exist in our institutions of higher learning, some think tanks, bureaucrats in our federal government that believe you can create a utopia. It's built on Jacques Rousseau's philosophy. He was a French philosopher who believed that human beings are non-spiritual beings. Therefore, they are created as a blank slate. And if you're created as a blank slate, then what that means is human beings are malleable, like clay. You can form them into whatever you want them to be. But in order to do that, you have to restructure the way in which human beings are formed and taught psychologically and developed. So what they did is they stripped out so many of these, what I would call, use the term, traditional ways for people to grow up. And one of the big things that they do is they wanted to deconstruct the family. They don't want families. A lot of people don't realize this, but one of the number one things in the Communist Manifesto was destroy the nuclear family. And that's why Marxism is evil. What's so strange is it shocks me to death that there's not a person who will stand up in our country and say Marxism is evil. Nobody says that anymore. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? It's not politics. It is an ideology designed to destroy human beings at their core. And the body count is off the charts in the hundreds of millions. And yet people today still think we can create a socialist utopia. And what we're going to do is we're going to strip out all of these things in order to do it. And what that does is, in order to do that, you have to go back to the very core, the very foundational premise of all things, and that is a simple question: what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be human, to be sentient? Why do you exist? You see, in order to do that, we also then say, there's no such thing as a male. There's no such thing as a female. Because there's no such thing as human beings anymore. And that's how we get to where we are today. How do you navigate this? What if you're a parent and you're thinking, oh my goodness, well, I'll just ignore it and my kids will grow up and they'll see healthy life. And that used to be true 50 years ago, but it's not anymore. If you're a grandparent, what are you going to do with your grandkids and your great-grandkids? You see, that's why we're doing this series. Because at its core, it cuts to the most important questions that you'll ever ask yourself. And that is, why am I here? And what does it mean to be alive and a human being? So, as with all things, we'll start with the guys. And today, I'm going to just ask the simple question is, how can you as a male understand what it means to be a male? What is a man? And why is it significant? So to do that, we're going to go to the Bible, and we're going to look in Proverbs chapter 2, and we're going to read what a father says to his son in what is called the Old Testament wisdom literature. So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to say to his son, look, son, you need to realize that it's God and God alone who can define what it means to be a man. So listen to what he says. Verse 1, my son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, indeed, if you call out for insight and you cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then, now here's the gem, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and you will find the knowledge of God. So what's the biblical point that he's making? He's saying, look, you can discover the knowledge of God. Well, what is the knowledge of God he's talking about? Does that mean, oh, I'm going to know a lot about God? Well, that's true, but what he's actually referring to is the knowledge of God, meaning how does God view the reality in which we live? And so he's saying, I want to know a knowledge about who God is, but I also need the knowledge of God, which explains why I'm here, who I am, what is the point and purpose of my life. So the knowledge of God is not just facts about who he is, but it's understanding the reality in which you live, the creation in which you live. And he says this, you don't discover that by accident. It takes work. You have to do the work. You have to prioritize it, treasure it, seek after it like gold or fine precious metals. All of these things are so valuable because once you do, you'll understand. And what will you end up understanding? Well, guys, what you'll understand is, what does it mean to be a male? You will start to understand yourself. And I'll tell you, if there's one fact that we can confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that today males have no idea what it means to be an authentic man in our world. They are confused. They are wondering. One question that every man asks himself over and over again is this, am I enough? Is this what a man is? Am I enough? Am I a man? Now, this is a side note, and I'll throw this in for free. I won't charge you for it. Once in a while, a joke works. Not very often. Once in a while. This is why, ladies, if you're married and your man at his core is asking this question, he's enough. So you have a choice. You can speak words of God into his life. You could say, oh, maybe you made a mistake here. Yeah, but you're enough. You're enough, and you can do it, and I believe in you. Or you can denigrate him. You can put him down. So you get to choose. You can speak the words of God or the words of the devil. It's your choice. Because, guys, in the end, you've got to answer that question. And the world, or even a woman in your life, cannot answer it for you. Only God can do that. And that's why you must pursue it with everything you've got, okay? That's how you answer the question about whether I am enough as a man. So I want to dig into this just a little bit more, okay? And I want to talk about Larry Crabb. I'm sorry, I just forgot his name there for a second. But Larry Crabb is a Christian psychologist, and what he does is he writes and he says, look, the search for, some people call it self-esteem or self-worth, is a very basic personal need. And so he writes about this, and what he ends up saying is this: the basic personal need of each person is to regard himself as a worthwhile human being. So guys, this is something that drives you. William Glasser wrote this. He said, everyone aspires to have a happy and successful, pleasurable belief in himself. So guys, this is something that drives us, whether we know it consciously or not. So where does this belief come from? That I am a successful, pleasurable belief in myself, that I am enough. Well, Robert McGee wrote a book called, in 1984, it's a classic if you ever get a chance to read it, called The Search for Significance. In this book, this is what he writes. He says, the feeling of significance is crucial to a man's emotional, spiritual, and social stability. It is the driving element within the human spirit. Understanding this single need opens the door to understanding our actions and attitudes. So guys, have you ever stopped and asked yourself, wow, what drives me as a male? What really drives me? Well, according to McGee, guess what? You'll never understand what you do, why you do it, the decisions you make, or who you truly are until you understand what drives you as a male. And only God can reveal that to you, because you live in a society where 20% of the population, and most of these people are elitists who are at war with masculinity. How many of you young people today who are going to university have to take a class that's required at the university level called Toxic Masculinity? This is very popular today. And what's happening is, what people are doing is they are taking the flaws of males and they are taking the excesses of males and they are attributing it to masculinity, okay? We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's important to understand how we are at war. There is a feminist by the name of Christina Hoff Sommers, and she's an academic and a scholar and a researcher. And what happened is she got married, she became a mom, and guess what? She was a mom of boys, and then she became a grandma, and so she decided, I'm going to do some research. And what she did is she then wrote a book called The War on Boys. And she said one of the problems that's happening in our school system and in our media and all these other areas is that we are now trying to turn boys into girls because we believe that girl behavior is the standard for boys. So we don't let boys just be boyish anymore. So guys, the only way to discover what it actually means to be an authentic, genuine male, you're going to have to seek it with all your heart and understand the knowledge of God. And that means not just about who God is, but who you are and the world in which you live. Now let's go on and see what he says next, and we'll dig into some of these other things. In the verses 6 through 9, he basically makes this point, is that you must pursue this because when you discover your masculine self, it's good. It's right, it's just, it's fair for you and for everybody around you. Listen to these words. Now the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. He guards the course of the just. He protects the way of his faithful ones. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. So you hear it right there. There's a path. It's a good path. The path will shield you. It brings you success. And guess what? We discover the understanding and knowledge and who we are as we are on this path. So the more that a man pursues his masculine soul, the way God created it, the better it is for everyone around them. But the problem is there's no place that really helps men discover their masculine soul with God. Right? A while back, I read this book. It's called Men in Church. And he starts the book off with this basic statement. He says, men celebrate masculinity. Today, men are going to the Church of Masculinity every Sunday. You see it on the lake with the boats and the wakeboards and the skis and the thing. And what does every man want in a boat? More power. You see it as men celebrate in fishing and in hunting. You see it in the way they create and innovate, whether it be projects and art in buildings and structures, or maybe it's gardens and landscaping and houses and roads and bridges. Men come together and celebrate. They celebrate it on motorcycles, whether they be off-road dirt biking or Harley cruisers. You see it on the weekend as they celebrate cars, and they celebrate adventure, and they celebrate things that are guy, masculine things. And in all things, whether it be a motorcycle or a car, the one thing that you always want is more of this and more power. Right? That's what you want. He says, and what's the one place you never find any of the celebration of masculinity? In the church. Because the church has become so feminized. Most guys go to church, think, I'm going to go learn how to be a nice guy today. You know, my wife will like me more because I'm not such a guy. I'm just nicer. But my friends, that's not what God has called you to. He didn't call you to be a nice guy at all. Jesus was not a nice guy. What Jesus was a righteous guy. He was a good guy. And that's why you need to pursue authentic masculinity. Authentic masculinity will not only be a great pursuit, but it will protect you and guide you throughout life. Look at what he says in verses 10 through 15. He says, now wisdom, so once you start pursuing it, he goes, verse 10, now wisdom will enter your heart. Don't you think we all need wisdom? I don't know about you guys, but I wish I could make perfect decisions every single time. I wish it was true that I could walk around and say, I am always right. But we don't live in that world. That's an alternative multiverse based on string theory, and we don't live in the Marvel universe. I don't have all the wisdom, but I need more. And even though I'll never be perfect, I need more. And he says, look, wisdom will enter my heart when I pursue my authentic masculinity. All knowledge will be pleasant to my soul. Discretion will protect you. Understanding will guard you. Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, and from whose men words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in wrongdoing and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. You see, your world, as I said before, considers masculinity toxic, and it takes the flaws and sins of men and attributes it to simply being a male. This is so important to understand. Masculinity is not toxic. The feminine is not toxic. Sin is toxic. Sin is toxic, all right? And sin, when it's coupled with masculinity, toxic things happen. Sin, when coupled with the feminine, toxic things happen. But females are not toxic because they're females. And males are not toxic because they're males. We are created in the image of God. The one place where males and females are absolutely equal is that we are both tainted by the sin of this world. Therefore, our penchant for evil is great. But if you pursue God and walk in his wisdom, wisdom will enter your heart. Knowledge will be a blessing to your soul, and you will overcome. The biblical principle here is it begins with your heart. You see, masculinity is about your heart. Your femininity is about your heart. So the stronger your heart, the stronger you become. This is why Jesus talked about a really interesting situation. He had just cast a demon out, and the Pharisees were complaining against him, criticizing him, doing all this stuff. And he goes, you can't go into a strong man's house and ransack his house unless you first go in and you bind the strong man. Once you tie him up, you can do what? You can ransack his house. Guys, this is a lesson for us because Satan, in the world in which we live, is predominantly trying to convince us to tie us up. You see, because once our strength is bound up, guess what? They can ransack your house, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. Don't try to be perfect. Just try to be stronger than the day you were before. And that is about pursuing your authentic masculinity. Number 4, your authentic masculinity shows you how to relate, most importantly, to women. And this has to do with the sexual drive of males. Let's read verses 16 through 19 and see what it says. Wisdom will save you also from the adulterous woman, from the wayward woman with her seductive words, who has left the partner of her youth. She ignored the covenant she made before God. Surely her house leads down to death, and her paths to the spirits of the dead. None who go to her return or attain the paths of life. Notice he takes the masculine drive of sexuality and shows how pursuing masculinity, your authentic self, protects you from the taint's influence to pervert this drive in your life. Now, I have never met a man not challenged in this area of his life. Never met a man. In 34 years of full-time ministry, this is the number one issue that keeps men from pursuing God because they feel unworthy due to this area of their life to do so. And that's what's really interesting. In that book, Search for Significance, McGee writes the following. He says, each of us has probably failed badly at some point in our lives. Perhaps some particular sin or weakness has caused us to feel condemned and unworthy of love. Without the hope and healing that God can provide, our evaluation of ourselves will eventually lead to despair. Without the hope and healing that God can provide, our evaluation of ourselves will eventually lead to despair. So men are left wondering how to pursue their authentic masculinity in God at the same time because they feel unworthy. because they've made a mistake or they're not perfect in this area of their life. But guess what? Feeling condemned and unworthy of love is a trap. The answer is to pursue your authentic masculinity in God, not being distant from him. Draw closer to him, and he draws closer to you, and what you find is your authentic self. So choose the path of authentic masculinity. Don't choose the path of the world because it doesn't have the answer. And then finally, look at the last few verses. Point number 5. Authentic masculinity is how you were meant to live as a man. You're meant to live in your authentic self. And your authentic self is what? It's masculine. Thus, you will walk in the ways of the good. So if you pursue it, you're following God, listening to God, guess what happens? You end up walking in the ways of the good, and you keep to the paths of the righteous. It's in the upright who will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it, but the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the unfaithful will be torn from it. Now, verse 21 and 22 is very important to understand because this is Old Covenant Jewish perspective. And that is, look, we have a contract that's been written out, right, between us and God. And that is, this land that I live in is going to produce the food I need. It's going to protect me as long as I keep up my end of the bargain and I do what God, I do the sacrifices, I go to the meals, I do the stuff that I'm supposed to do. He says, if you do that, you work the plan, you're going to be living in the land. Otherwise, the land will be taken away from you. Now, what we have to understand is that's an Old Testament principle, and now we need to move to the New Testament principle. And that is a new covenant. You know what the new covenant is? Is that you are now under the redemptive covenant of Jesus Christ based upon his sacrifice on the cross, his blood shed for your sins. So now you are on his team. You got his jersey. If he had a tattoo, you'd have it tattooed somewhere where people can see it. I think that joke sort of worked. People are still thinking, what? Huh? What he's saying is that under the redemptive covenant of Christ, you're under a different criteria now than the Old Testament Jewish system. And under this new system, what you are is that it is by grace that I've been saved through faith, not as a result of works. There's nothing I can do. I can't boast about it. It is a free gift of God. And so when you move from death to life, when you've been redeemed, when it says any person is in Christ, they are a new creation. Jesus told Nicodemus, it's like being born all over again. You're totally new, right? So now you've been adopted into the family of God, and you're now seated with Jesus in the heavenly realms, and you have the full inheritance of every spiritual blessing that is in heaven. So now that you are on this team, you can now pursue true, authentic masculinity in the way I was meant to, and I can live that way. And here's what's so interesting. Let's go back to the very beginning. Why is the future male and female? Because you cannot sit men down and tell them what masculinity is, authentic masculinity is. You can't do that. You know, how often can you sit a man down, ladies, and talk to him and get him to change? Did that joke work at all? Yeah, there's a little bit of an amen there, right? I keep telling him what to do and he just won't do it. Hello, McFly. Is anybody in there? Right? Because that's not how men grow. That's how men learn. It's not taught, it's caught. And what they do is they pursue what it means to be masculine authentically in a masculine community of men. You see, this is the whole purpose of the boot camp that our men's ministry has. It happens once a year, and that's it. And the purpose of it is, it'll be on May 19th. It's Thursday night. So when you get off work, you can go up there if you want. It's going to be Friday and Saturday and just a portion of Sunday so it doesn't blow your whole Sunday up. But the purpose of it is that there's some teaching there, but the majority of it is men in groups of other men doing things, everything from activities to challenges to interactions, because it's in doing shoulder to shoulder that men tend to learn and grow the most. So the challenge is to participate in that if you want to be a guy who understands, well, what does it mean to be really authentically masculine and not have my masculinity tainted by sin? How do I manage that? What does it look like? And so I encourage you, afterward, the men's ministry, they have a booth out there. Go out there, talk to them, see if you could participate, sign up. It'll bless you. Because in the end, if you don't understand what authentic masculinity is, men, something may happen in your life, and when that bad thing happens, if your masculinity is hooked on the wrong thing, it can rip your soul out. There's a man, his name is Colonel Gary Gadsden, and he's a huge guy, and he played football for West Point. And the reason why he's so famous at West Point is because West Point was losing, and he stood up in a team meeting, and he made this speech to all of his cadets about what does it mean to really be men on the gridiron, okay? And what he said is this. He said, look, afterwards, his speech inspired them so much, West Point went on a 10-game winning streak, which had never happened. So it's like, man, this guy is a leader of men. He got out in the Army. He moved up as an officer. He became a full colonel. He was in charge of an entire brigade. He was deployed 3 separate tours to Iraq during the Iraq War. And what was amazing about him is he has commendations, all kinds of things. It's just unbelievable how decorated as a soldier and a leader that he is. And a couple of his soldiers were killed. And so he went to a memorial service in Baghdad, and on his way back, a roadside bomb took out his Humvee. And what happened is, you'll see in the picture, is that he is now a bilateral amputee above the knee. And yet, that did not take away his masculinity. And today, you know what he's known for is he goes around, he is a highly sought after motivational speaker, a mentor of men in business and faith, powerful, powerful guy, recognized. He's so popular, they made a goofy movie called Battleship, where aliens come down, and they actually cast him in the movie and wrote a role just for him because the way he's lived his life since his injury, which happened in 2007, was just as impressive as how he lived his life before. And the one common denominator in before and after his injury is this. Never forget it. He's a masculine, authentic man. And that's who God is calling you to be.
As a church, our hope and prayer is that you will build a life on a firm foundation. Strength, courage, confidence, and most importantly, the capacity to overcome any challenge in life all begins with a firm foundation. When we discover our authentic selves is when we live in the fullness and joy of who we are meant to be. The real question we're going to explore is, who knows you best, the world or the one who created you? If you are visiting on campus or watching online for the first time, be sure to learn more about us by texting FHNEW to 72000. We would love to have you be a part of our family. Now let's stand for a closing blessing. And if you're doing church at home or watching online, do the discussion questions to go a little deeper.
Lord, we just thank you that you are the one who designed us and that we are real people in a real world, and we want to live a real faith. So we're going to follow you and your path. Amen. God bless you. Have a really great Sunday. How you feeling?
Yes, it is, yeah. To you